Hey everybody, Jake here from CVP, and today we are comparing four incredibly popular Sony cameras, the a7S Mark III, FX3, FX6, and FX9. We'll be explaining all the differences and the pros and cons of each camera to help you decide on which camera you may want to pick up for your next project. Let's start off with clarifying the difference between the a7S Mark III and the FX3. Price-wise, there is only around a £200 price difference, which really isn't too much between them. Both cameras share a good chunk of their DNA. They feature the same 12.9 megapixel 35.6 by 23.8mm full-frame sensor that has the same rated 15 plus stops of dynamic range. They also pretty much have the same chipsets, so the image produced should be identical between them. They both have the same recording resolutions, codecs and frame rates, internally and externally. They have the same inputs and outputs across their bodies, the same media options, and a similar core menu system. However, the FX3 has seen some additions that the a7S III hasn't as of the release of this video. Version 2 firmware for the FX3 added a bunch of new features that the a7S III doesn't have yet, which makes the FX3 more distinctly positioned as the better camera to shoot video on. Let's quickly walk through the new additions. First off is log shooting mode. This allows you to shoot in 3 different modes when recording in S-Log3: Cine-EI, Cine-EI Quick, and Flexible ISO. S-Log2 has also been removed from the camera. Next, you can now ingest up to 16 user LUTs into the FX3. You can either bake these into your recorded image or use them as a monitor LUT. With the new VMC BNC M1 adapter cable, you can now use the USB micro on the camera to jam timecode. Next is the new list style main menu system, and this is a new layout for the main menu which gives faster access to key video menu items. Standby movie screen puts all settings around your image, similar to Venice's EVF layout, so you have a full view of your frame and settings at the same time without obstructing your frame or image at all. Metadata and autofocus have also seen updates as well as a bunch more. It really does give people a lot more value out of the FX3. All of these changes are great for video shooters. However, we think there are a few other things that Sony could add to really push the FX3 to the next level. Physically, they're sized quite similarly, but there are some key differences. The a7S III features its excellent EVF, whereas the FX3 only has its rear LCD for monitoring. The FX3 has a bunch of 1/4" threads across its body for easy mounting and rigging. These threads are great for rigging the camera in really stripped down configurations, such as in and onto cars, as you can mount it to multiple points of contact without needing a cage. The button layout and design are also a little different across the cameras, with the FX3's being a little more refined for video shooting. The FX3 also has better tally lights and options than the a7S III, which can be really handy for a lot of shooters. The FX3 also features a fan internally, which allows you to record without worrying about any overheating issues, which we have seen with the a7S Mark III in certain environments and scenarios. However, the counterpoint to this is that the a7S III is sealed, which probably results in better weather sealing. The FX3 also comes with a top handle out of the box, which also features an audio module attached to it, which is basically Sony's optional XLR K3M, which can be used with the a7S III. The K3M costs around £500, so this being included with the FX3's price is pretty awesome. So with all this in mind, which one should you buy out of the two? Well, with only a £200 difference, I think there are really only 2 reasons to choose the a7S III. If you really want the EVF, and if you want a more traditional a7S shooting experience physically. Otherwise, the FX3, in my opinion, is the clear winner. It features much more for video shooters at only a little bit of a markup, which when you factor in the price of a K3M, actually doesn't look too bad. It's also going to give you more peace of mind, as it doesn't feature the same overheating limitations of the a7S Mark III, which any working professional will appreciate. Right, let's take a look at the FX3 versus the FX6. The FX6 is a step up from the FX3. It's roughly £2,000 more, which is a lens or two. They actually both share the same sensor. However, the processing behind the FX6 is different, which results in an improvement of image quality over the FX3. Though recording externally on both cameras will bring the image quality differences closer together. You can also control the level of noise reduction happening in the FX6, which isn't possible on the FX3. They both also take the same media and record very similar formats, apart from a couple of details. The FX6 can capture DCI 4K, while the FX3 is limited to just UHD 4K. The FX6 uses XAVC-I with an MXF wrapper, whereas the FX3 uses XAVC-SI with an MP4 wrapper. Both of these have their benefits. MXF is a verbose and redundant format and is easier to be repaired than MOV or MP4. MP4 can contain metadata that MXF can't, such as subtitles. For working professionals, I would say MXF is the better out of the two. Both cameras feature very similar autofocus systems. but I think the FX3 is a little bit easier to use with its touch interface and menu. The FX6's menu structure is more like an FS style camera, whereas the FX3 is a mix of that and the Alpha series menu systems. Different people will prefer one over the other, but I would say the FX6 is more video focused, but with the V2 firmware of the FX3, they are now closer than ever. The FX6 features a few more video focused features such as a waveform for exposure, the ability to use shutter angle and gain or dB for your shutter speed and ISO settings, focus breathing compensation, picture cache recording, and bokeh control mode. The FX6's body design is great. If you've used an FS5 before, you'll feel right at home on the FX6. It's fantastic to shoot with, and while it does suck to say, turning up to a shoot and a client seeing an FX6 will make you look more professional and potentially allow you to charge more for your time than an FX3 will. The FX3 really is a small and compact camera, but so is the FX6 with what's inside of it. It has loads of physical buttons as well and dials for changing settings on the fly. The top handle that the FX6 has is also far better than the one with the FX3. It feels much more robust and features a bunch of extra controls, such as a record button, which is really helpful. This handle also features a dual XLR input, similar to the FX3, but this is controlled on the side of the body and not on the handle. One of the downsides of the FX6 is that these XLR inputs are the only options for recording audio into the camera. So if you remove the handle, you cannot record audio apart from the internal mic, which is only really good as a scratch mic. This is really annoying when you want to use the camera without the top handle, such as for super stripped down setups and when on support equipment such as a gimbal. The FX3 features a 3.5mm mic input when the handle is removed, so you can still get audio into the camera. For this reason, you'll see a lot of people running FX6s or FX9s with an FX3 as a gimbal camera. The FX6 also comes with a fantastic side handle which can be attached to the right hand side of the camera or removed and repositioned as you want to use it using certain accessories. You can control a bunch from the grip and it feels great in the hand. This paired with our mod for the monitor or a third-party EVF and a good shoulder rig can turn the FX6 into a great little shoulder mount camera, whereas the FX3 doesn't really work too great in these types of configurations. Both the FX3 and FX6 feature internal fans for cooling the camera as you shoot, but the FX6 definitely has a more robust cooling system which results in more reliability than the FX3. The monitor that comes with the FX6 out of the box can easily be repositioned and comes with a little hood out of the box. This makes it a lot more versatile than the FX3's, and means you can really easily reposition it for different configurations. The FX6 has a lot more professional focused inputs and outputs on its body than the FX3 does, such as an SDI and a dedicated BNC for timecode, whereas the FX3 requires a USB adapter for timecode. The FX6 having this 12G SDI output is a big feature for so many people, as it means this camera will fit into far more production requirements than the FX3 will. Another massive feature of the FX6 is its internal ND system. This system offers a range of 2 to 7 stops, can be controlled incredibly finely, and even has an automatic mode, which for run and gun shooters will be awesome. Once you've used the camera with NDs built into the body, you won't want to go back to a system without them. The FX6 uses Sony's BPU battery, whereas the FX3 uses the smaller MPF-Z battery type. You can get much larger native batteries for the FX6 than you can for the FX3. And this means you don't need to rig larger sources onto the camera or run with loads of smaller batteries in your bag. There are also loads of third-party BPU batteries that will allow you to get power outputs on them, such as DTAP, which will allow you to power something like a monitor or wireless video transmitter without the need for a second battery source on the camera, which you would need with the FX3. The FX6 also comes with a DC power supply out of the box, whereas the FX3 requires you to buy one separately. For anyone shooting in a controlled environment, a power supply like this can save you from having to swap out batteries and will make shooting easier during longer recording sessions, such as an event or an interview. In conclusion, the key difference between the FX3 and the FX6 comes down to usability. The FX3 is a more compact and light camera, which may be better for some. It has the ability to shoot stills and features internal 5-axis image stabilization, which the FX6 does not. All 4 cameras do feature the ability to capture gyro metadata, however, in camera, which can then be used for speedy stabilization in Sony's Catalyst Browse software. This can be handy for the odd shot, but doesn't replace proper support equipment or sensor and lens stabilization. It will also reduce your deliverable resolution, which is something to consider. The FX6 is a killer one-man band video workhorse, which will fit into plenty of more demanding production scenarios. For professionals wanting a camera that can adapt to unpredictable shooting situations straight out of the box, the FX6 is the obvious choice here. The FX3 is smaller, lighter and cheaper, and it will be able to produce images close to the FX6, which makes it a perfect B camera alongside the FX6. For some people, the FX3 will do a lot of what the FX6 can do, but the internal ND system, fantastic physical design, professional inputs and outputs, improved battery and mains options, and improved formats will make it the smarter choice for many working camera operators. The FX9 is just under double the price of the FX6, coming in at a touch over £11,000. This really puts it at a different price point to the FX6, which will price some people out who are looking at the FX6. However, we have had plenty of people ask us the difference between the two, so it's definitely worth exploring the differences and if it's worth paying the extra for the FX9. If you've used the FS7 a lot, the FX9 will be the easiest camera by far to get used to, as they share so much physically. The FX9 features all of the fantastic inputs and outputs you would expect for this level of camera, and supports Genlock and RCP support. There are two XLR ports built into the body, not onto the handle like the FX6, which I prefer as it means you can remove the handle and still get audio into the camera. You can also adjust 4 channels of audio on the side of the FX9, whereas you only have the option to control 2 channels on the FX6's body. Whether you prefer the body design for shooting out of the two will depend on the work you mainly do, to be honest with you. The FX9 is pretty much ready to shoot on the shoulder out of the box, as it comes with a little shoulder pad, loop for the monitor, and an extension arm for the grip, so it does lean more towards that style of shooting. The FX6 is more designed to be shot handheld and is better for that than the FX9. It will also be much easier to fit on gimbals than the FX9 will. However, for shoulder configurations, it will require some rigging to get it sitting nicely on your shoulder, and this can end up making it the same size as the FX9 with larger lenses on the front because you need to counterbalance it. All of the cameras in this video use Sony's E-mount for lenses, but the FX9 is a little different from the others. It uses a locking E-mount similar to the one found on the Venice under its PL mount. This could be seen as a pro or a con, as it's a much more secure mount with less play, but it also is much harder to use as a solo operator than the regular E-mount is. The FX9 sensor is also full frame like the other cameras, but it is a different sensor from the rest of them. It is a 6K sensor capable of capturing downsampled 4K in camera. This results in a more detailed image and gives you closer to true 4K resolution than the sensor in the FX6. The FX6's sensor does have a much faster readout speed than the FX9's, which for people filming fast action or sports could be a deal breaker. Dynamic range is pretty similar between the two. Honestly, they both can produce great looking images. We've tested both these cameras before, and from our latitude tests, both perform really well. The FX6 doesn't hold colour quite as well as the FX9, but does have less of a green shift when underexposed. When overexposed, they behaved quite similarly. In S-Log3, the FX9 has a dual base ISO of 800 and 4000, whereas the FX6's is 800 and 12800. Sony are marketing the FX9 as having a dual base ISO sensor, whereas the FX6 is not marketed this way. This is most likely due to the mapping of the dynamic range not being one-to-one at the different bases on the FX6 like it is on the FX9. We looked at this in our technical overview of the FX6, which you can check out here if you want to learn more. The FX6's higher base ISOs are one of the reasons why the FX6 has some of the best style-like performance you can get in a camera, and ultimately it's better than the FX9 in this regard. Both cameras feature the same awesome ND system that we mentioned in the FX6 earlier. When it comes to frame rates and resolutions, the FX6 can capture 4K up to 120p and 1080p up to 240 FPS with no crop. What the FX9 can capture depends on the scan mode you have it in. In its 6K scan mode, you can go up to 30p, in 5K full frame, which is roughly 83% of the full frame scan, you can go up to 60p, and both of these are recorded in either DCI or UHD 4K. When recording in 1080, you can use the 6K scan up to 180 FPS. In the camera Super 35 mode, these frame rates and resolution combos are pretty much the same, apart from you can only go up to 1080p 120p. So overall, I would say that the FX6 does win out here. Both can output RAW, but the FX6 actually wins out here. It can output RAW via its 12G SDI port on its body, whereas the FX9 requires Sony's large XDCA back for it to do so. The XDCA does add a range of other features, like the ability to use drop-in mics, which in the broadcast mode is very common, but it is massive and expensive. The FX9 has 2 BNC video outs, whereas the FX6 only has 1. And this could be really helpful for larger productions that need multiple feeds being fed out of the camera. The FX9 also features better crop modes and results. Because of the increased sensor resolution, there is a Super 35 4K crop mode and a 2K Super 16 crop mode. This allows you to use pretty much any lens you want on the camera without sacrificing good deliverable resolution. This will be an important feature for many camera operators working in TV and documentaries, where you may need to use a Super 35 or B4 lens for the increased zoom range they offer while not being as massive as their limited full frame counterparts. The FX9 also features 1.3 and 2 times in-camera anamorphic D-squeeze support, which the FX6 does not. I can't see many people using the FX9 with anamorphic lenses, but this is a good option to have regardless. Both feature great autofocus, but I would say from our testing, the FX6 is slightly better out of the two. The FX9 can also shoot interlaced and features compatibility with XT-Cam Air, which the FX6 does not. The cameras do feature different media types. The FX9 uses XQD, whereas the FX6 uses CF Express Type A and SD. XQD is an older media type than Type A. I think the FX9 will be a camera used for years to come, so the cards used for it will hold their value, but not quite as well as the Type A cards used in the FX6. Offload times will also be much faster with Type A cards than XQD due to the increased read and write speeds of Type A. Both cameras use the same battery, however the FX9 has a much higher power draw of 35.2 watts versus the 18 watts of the FX6. This results in needing basically double the batteries for equivalent run times when compared to the FX6. That's definitely something to factor into the cost of your camera package. Both of these cameras are versatile workhorses, but the FX9 has a few features that make it that little bit better for slightly more applications, and especially broadcast. I do think, however, that these differences will only warrant the fairly substantial price difference to a few end users, and for a good chunk, the FX6 will be the more logical choice. For working professionals, cameras are ultimately investments, and you'll need to get the camera that you think is going to allow you to expand and grow your business and get you onto the jobs you want to be on. Sony's cameras are so popular that they all carry brand weight in our industry, but the FX9 not only looks the part, but will also allow you to charge more and get you onto more productions than the other cameras for the most part. But this really depends on what work you are aiming to do. Ultimately, Sony has made a great, really complete line of cameras for their cinema line. The FX3 could be one person's sole compact versatile videography camera, or another's B or C camera alongside their larger and more traditionally designed FX6 or 9. Cameras are tools, and which one you need to get your job done will depend on your needs. As of the release of this video, all of Sony's cameras are hard for us to get stock of. So if you want to grab any of the cameras we mentioned in this video, I would suggest reaching out to us and getting your name down on a pre-order list ASAP. All of these cameras can go wrong, and all of them will need accessories around them to get the most out of them. Luckily, we offer support on both of these points. Our team of technical consultants will be able to assist you with recommending the best accessories for the package you want to create, and our in-house Sony certified engineering and support team will be able to help you if you have any issues with your camera at all. If you have any more questions, let us know in the comments below. We've done various videos covering all of these cameras, so if you want to learn more, check them out on our channel. Let us know which camera you would choose in the comments below. And if you like the video, please give it a like and maybe even consider subscribing so you don't miss out on our awesome upcoming content. And thank you so much for watching.